Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video day. And the Houston Texans beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 20-12 in preseason week 1. Preseason game 2, though. This is preseason week 1 for 28 of the 30 NFL teams outside of the Texans and the Bears. But since the Houston Texans did play in the Hall of Fame game, this is preseason game 2. Unlike preseason game 1, the Texans were actually able to complete this game. I don't think there was any bad weather in Pittsburgh. But anyways, Texans complete their first game, really complete their first game because the first game got canceled 3 minutes left in the third quarter against the Chicago Bears, and the Texans lost 21-17, which, look, I'm not going to say it wasn't a real loss because the game is, canceled and they called it, so it's over. The Texans lost. But the Texans were not given a chance to end that game in a proper way, so it is a loss, but we don't know if the Texans would have went out there and got a win with still 3 more minutes left in the third, an entire fourth quarter. So, because, that part of the game is really interesting because you got the guys fighting for the roster spots playing. Yeah. But, all right, let's get into this game. Texans win 20-12. Not a lot of scoring for the Texans in that second half, but in the first half, things were great when Davis Mills and C.J. Stroud were out there. We didn't see either one of those guys in the second half. Davis Mills continues to look really good, and C.J. Stroud in 2 drives looked good. Starting offense went out there for 2 drives, quick 3 and out for the first drive, and then a quick touchdown on the second drive. This defense was really good today. I thought the pass defense was not so good. Kyle Allen went out there and had a great game. Former Houston Texans threw 17 for 23 for 193 passing yards. But early on, I thought the pass defense, some of the guys that you probably will see getting a lot of playing time, although I know there were a couple DBs that were out, but we still saw Jalen Petrie and Derek Stingley Jr. out there today. So I thought the pass defense could have been better, but I really liked what I saw from the defensive line. Thought they looked really good. But Texans score on a C.J. Stroud, a Tank Dell 34-yard touchdown pass. It's great to see, that connection together again. I mean, the Tank Dell story this year is going to be a great story. And I think that I don't know if he'll win the award. I doubt he wins the award because I think there are a couple other strong candidates. But Tank Dell could be a candidate for Comeback Player of the Year. This is a guy who broke his fibula in the month of December, then gets shot in the leg in the month of April. And now in the month of August, he's having almost 35-yard touchdown receptions. It's going to be a good year for Tank Dell. I'm excited for him this year. And in only 2 drives, we saw 1 reception for a 34-yard touchdown. C.J. Stroud looked good. He threw, I believe it was 41 passing. It was like 41 or 42 passing. It was 41 passing yards and 2 drives with a touchdown. So C.J. went out there and looked good too. I'll get into his full stats in just a minute. But that was getting into the scoring summary. That was the first score for the Texans, and they made it 7-0. Those are the only score in the first quarter. The Texans did, have a shutout in the first half. Durango Ballaway would have a 4-yard rushing touchdown with 3 minutes and 52 seconds left in the second quarter to make it 14-0 with a Farrenbarren extra point. Farrenbarren was busy in this game. He really was. He had 2 field goals, 1 from 51, 1 from 36, and he had 2 extra points. He even had a field goal that he missed late in the game. So total of 5 kicks from Farrenbarren today, 2 extra points made, 2 field goals made, 1 field goal missed. But let's get into Farrenbarren now. With 3 seconds left in the second quarter, he knocked in a 36-yard field goal. Texans got the ball back with 1 minute and 52 seconds. Davis Mills led the Texans on a 10-play, 62-yard drive that capped off with Farrenbarren knocking it in for 36 yards, 17-0. And how about Karen Hayward's brother, Connor Hayward, catching a 6-yard touchdown pass from former Houston Texans quarterback Kyle Allen, and then Matthew Wright mixed the extra point. Now he is the backup kicker for Pittsburgh, as their current kicker Chris Boswell was not playing in this game, 17-6. Then Farrenbarren, with 12 seconds left in the third quarter, knocks in a 51-yard field goal, 8-play, 43-yard drive. It was a long drive, 40. It was a 43-yard drive, 4 minute and 19 seconds. For only a 43-yard drive, that's a lot of time. 20-6 after that Fairbairn field goal, and then Dejon Edwards would have a 1-yard touchdown run, and they would go for the 2-point conversion, and it's 20-12. Pittsburgh was definitely, they weren't going to their kicker in this game. They had a lot of moments in this game where they were risky with the football, going for it on fourth downs, going for 2-point conversion. I think a big reason of that is just because of the fact that their main kicker, Chris Boswell, is not kicking in this game. They had Matthew Wright out there, and I think that's why we saw them being aggressive. In there, one of their first drives, Kyle Allen led them down the field. He looked great in a drive, and they got all the way to like the 1 or 2 yard line, first and goal. Texans' run defense was absolutely outstanding. 3 straight plays and got them down to 4th and goal. You think they take their 3? This is right after the Texans scored their touchdown, so they wanted to tie the game. I think a main reason was because they wanted to give someone an opportunity to score in the end zone instead of, getting a kicker like Matthew Wright, an easy field goal right there. And Kyle Allen threw a ball to Calvin Austin. Texans played terrible defense on it, gave him a wide open look in the corner of the end zone, and he just dropped it and lost his footing as well. And that was one opportunity. Also, the 2-point conversion I just went over that they ended up going for, which could have put that at a 7-point game, and decided to go for that and failed. But those are two things that you probably don't do in the regular season. You're going to go for the extra point in the regular season early in the game like that on fourth and goal, even at the 1 and 2 yard line. Most likely, you'll probably take the field goal. Maybe later in the game, you might make that call to go for the touchdown. But early in the game, those are two calls that, early in the game, you're probably going for the field goal. Late in the game, down to get down by 7, they're going for the extra point. So it's preseason. These are decisions that I think are a little bit different to make than it would be in the regular season. But Pittsburgh was being aggressive with the football and offense, but. That's just them giving their guys extra opportunities, which when you have a backup kicker out there, there's more of a reason to want to give your guys extra opportunities. It's not like he's obviously he's a guy that has to prove himself as well, but they have a top-notch kicker in Chris Boswell already, so he's not taking Boswell's job. But all right, game leaders, Davis Mills threw 8 for 13 with 89 passing yards. Former Davis Mills backup. Kyle Allen was the backup for Davis Mills. And then eventually started 2 games for the Texans. Quick, brief 2 games, which were terrible. But Kyle Allen's now in a position where he could become the QB3 for Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. 17 for 23, 193 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 1 interception. That 1 interception was to Brandon Hill, and that was like a little bit of a desperation throw at the end of this game. I'm not saying that interception doesn't count. Just want to note that it was a little bit of a desperation throw. But Kyle Allen looked good in this game. Coming in a little bit late in the game after Justin Fields played the first couple drives, looked good. Looked really good. Rushing yards, Jawar Jordan, Texans rookie, looked good with 6 carries and 22 rushing yards, while Dejon Edwards also looked good. 3 carries, 28 rushing yards, 1 touchdown. Receiving yards, Robert Woods playing with Davis Mills looked really good. 4 receptions, 42 receiving yards. I'll get into him a little bit later. Calvin Austin, the third, who I talked about, dropping a touchdown pass. Even though he dropped a touchdown pass, still had 2 receptions for 49 receiving yards. Let's go over some other stats in this game. CJ Stroud went 2 for 4 in this game, throwing 41 passing yards with 1 touchdown. One of his incompletions was so stupid. It was a thrown ball to Dalton Schultz that clearly was a pass interference, and the ref, it looked like the reason he didn't call flag was because he couldn't find the flag. So it's not just the players that are working on fixing mistakes that they make in the preseason, it's also the referees. But CJ still looked good in his 2 drives that he played, so I love seeing CJ Stroud back out there. Case Keenum, look, this backup 2 battle is looking good, and I heard the Texans announcers in this game say, hey, they need to potentially look at some time once they give CJ Stroud the proper reps to playing both Davis Mills and Case Keenum more. Well, actually, I think they just said they need to play Case Keenum more. And I agree with that. I really do, because we saw Case Keenum, go out there and have another great game, 5 for 6, 40 passing yards. Now, unfortunately, the team did not score when he was out there because Kylie Thornburn did miss a field goal, but he was good in last week's game against Chicago Bears, but has not been used a lot. Weird thing about this game is Tim Boyle came in the game before Case Keenum. He threw 4 for 8 with 28 passing yards, and I fear that, and I know it's coming anyways, but I think that you could see Tim Boyle get cut by the Texans after this game. You're going to see roster cuts happen. I think the roster will go from 90 to 85, if I'm correct. That means 5 guys will get cut. And if we're going to see 5 guys get cut, I think Tim Boyle could be one of them. So that is a way for the Texans to give more playing time to both Davis Mills and Case Keenum. Because with how good both of those guys have been in preseason, I honestly thought after last week, after what Davis Mills did, and after seeing him tonight in the end of the first quarter and the whole second quarter after C.J. Stroud came out of the game, that he's got that backup 2 spot locked up. But Keenum's looked really good in the preseason. So this is a real battle right now for the backup quarterback position. And it's very important because C.J. Stroud, we want to see him healthy. We want to see him out there 17 games and a perfect health. But this is a guy who missed 2 games last year. So that it looked like last year the Texans weren't really prepared for that kind of decision because, we saw the Texans go out there with Case Keenum against the Titans last year. He looked really good. The team got the win in overtime, but then the next week they go up against a better team like the Cleveland Browns, and Case Keenum was actually absolutely terrible, and they pulled him. Davis Mills comes in, and he throws 2 touchdown passes in 2 drives. So I'm interested to see who the Texans decide on being the backup quarterback for C.J. Stroud. But Tim Boyle, like I mentioned, did throw 4 for 8 with 28 passing yards, but I fear that his time as a Texan might end, which we all know it's coming anyways. But I think you're going to see potentially Tim Boyle cut this week after this game, potentially. All right, Houston rushing yards. Jawar Jordan did have 22 rushing yards. Xavier Hutchinson, wide receiver, had 1 carry for 19 rushing yards. Cam Akers had 6 carries for 17 rushing yards. Durain Gabalaway had 3 carries, 10 yards, and 1 touchdown. Steven Sims had 1 for 7 yards. Very disappointing. Damian Pierce had 4 carries for 4 yards. Longest was 2 yards. We've been hearing the Texans staff and D'Amico Ryan's head coach hype him up all training camp, and he's so much improved after his down year last year, and this is what we see in his first preseason game. I hope we see better in the next 2 preseason games, or I'm a little disappointed in what I've seen from him. But it's 1 preseason game, so let's hope we can get better. J.J. Taylor with 1 carry for 3 yards. British Brooks, 2 carries for 3 rushing yards. He's another guy I think could get cut this week. The running back position is one of the positions in this roster that is very tight. Has a lot of guys that should be making the roster. I think he's one of those guys that is at the bottom of that list. Case Keenum had 2 carries for -1 yards, and Johnny Johnson had 1 carry for -4 yards, -4 yards. Now, Justin Fields, I want to go back to the Steelers real quick. Justin Fields had 5 through 5 for 6 with 67 passing yards. He looked good, but he did fumble once in this game, and he was sacked twice. But Jalen Warren did have 3 carries for 11 rushing yards for the Steelers, which was pretty solid. Now, Texans receiving, I love what I saw from Robert Woods. I want to get more into him. He looked really good today. 4 receptions, 42 receiving yards. I don't see a way with what we saw from him today. I don't see a way where he doesn't make this Texans roster. Tank Dell looked amazing like I went over. 1 reception, 34 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. Rookie tight end Cade Stover looked amazing. 3 receptions, 32 receiving yards. No Brevin Jordan this game. Cam Akers had 3 receptions for 24 receiving yards. Johnny Johnson III had 2 receptions for 22 receiving yards. He's definitely a guy that's not going to make this 53-man roster, but if he can keep playing good and making good receptions like he did in this game in the preseason, he definitely could make the practice squad. Quintez Cephas had 3 receptions for 18 receiving yards. Steven Sims had 1 reception for 15 receiving yards. John Mechie had 1 reception for 7 receiving yards, while Xavier Hutchinson had 1 reception for 4 receiving yards. Dalton Schultz did have 1 target, but didn't have a reception, while Ben Skoranek had 2, but didn't have a reception. Now, Steelers receiving outside of Calvin Austin III. Scotty Miller, former Bucs wide receiver, looked great in this game with 3 receptions for 47 receiving yards. George Pickens also had 2 receptions for 25 receiving yards. And Najee Harris had 1 reception for 16 receiving yards. Pat Freiermuth even had 1 reception for 6 receiving yards. Let's get into Brandon Hill because I think it's time to talk about Brandon Hill. Brandon Hill did amazing in this game. He recovered a fumble on the drop punt on the Steelers, which, funny enough, I think was also by Calvin Austin, if I'm correct. But Calvin Austin, I believe, fumbled that ball that was a punt by Tommy Townsend and was recovered by Brandon Hill. Not only did he recover that led to a touchdown for the Texans, which is the big reason why the Texans won this game, and then he had the game-winning interception. Brandon Hill was basically the reason the Texans won this game, getting that huge recovery that led to a touchdown, getting the deep ball interception. He was amazing for the Texans. He was a 7th-round draft pick last year for the Texans in 2023. If you would have asked me last week, I would have told you there's no way Brandon Hill is making this Texans roster. Maybe he's a practice squad guy if he makes the roster. But after what I've seen in this first game, this first game of him, I like what I saw from him. And this isn't a guy that one performance like this and you say, okay, well, he's definitely making the 53-man roster after this game. But, it's not like that. But if he continues to do stuff like this, he continues to make an impact like he did in this game, he will make the 53-man roster. If he continues to be solid after in the next 2 games after this performance, he won't make the 53-man roster, but he'll probably make the practice squad. But if he continues to play like this, he very well might make the 53-man roster for the Texans, especially at a safety position where anybody can make it. I think the only players' jobs that are safe in the safety room right now are Jalen Petrie, Jimmy Ward, and Kalen Bullock. I think everybody else is not safe. Eric Murray led the Texans in tackles today with 6 tackles. Mari Edwards had 5 with a half a sack and 2 tackles for loss. People have been saying that he's been the best defensive lineman for the Texans in camp, and he definitely showed that he definitely basically has been. He's looked great in training camp, and he showed that today. And with Danico Autry getting suspended, Mari Edwards Jr. is going to have to step up, and he did that in this game. Troy Pride Jr. had 4 tackles. I'm going to go over the following players that had 4 tackles. Rookie Kalen Bullock, Brandon Hill had 4 tackles. 2 of those were solo tackles. Following players had 3 tackles. Also, D'Angelo Ross had 1 tackle for loss. He had 4 tackles in the game. But following players had 3 tackles. Chris Boyd, Miles Bryant, Jamal Hill, rookie, Florenzo Futukasi, who also had a tackle for loss, which was the Texans' first tackle for loss, Jalen Petrie. Then the following players had 2 tackles. McTelvin Agem had 2 tackles, which one of those tackles was a sack, which is a tackle for loss. Jacob Phillips, who had 2 with a tackle for loss. Max Tooley. Then Danielle Hunter, who had a sack in his first Texans game. Neville Hewitt, Delshawn Phillips, Malik Fisher, who had a tackle for loss, Derek Stingley Jr., MJ Stewart, Aziz Al-Shahir, and then the following players had 1 tackle: Mike Ford Jr., Khalil Davis, Marcus Harris, Jerry Hughes, who had a half a sack, so a team sack for the Texans in this game, Derek Barnett, and Ali Gay. So a total of 3 sacks for this Texans team, a half a sack for Jerry Hughes and Mari Edwards, a sack for Danielle Hunter, and a sack for McTelvin Agem, and then 8 tackles for loss for this Texans defense. So the Texans defense looks great. Brandon Hill also had an interception, which he returned for 35 yards. So look, he's making a great impact. 4 tackles, interception for 35 yards returned, a fumble recovery on a punt. So he's making impact on defense and special teams. So my biggest takeaways in this game is Davis Mills looks great at backup quarterback. CJ Stroud and Tank Dell still have that awesome connection. Brandon Hill, keep an eye out on him because he's looking great. Robert Woods is a guy who I'm really excited to see what he can do in 2024 because even though there's a lot of depth at this wide receiver position, the Texans already have Diggs, Collins, and Dell and Noah Brown, he could still be a guy that steps up for this Texans team because there are going to be injuries in this wide receiver core, and he's a guy that's going to be the next man to step up, and he looked great today in 4 receptions for 42 receiving yards. I liked what I saw from some of the guys in the running back room, mainly not Dameon Pierce, but Jawar Jordan, rookie, and running back / kicker Durain Gabalaway. So a lot of positives in this Texans preseason game 2, week 1 game, but a lot of negatives as well. Pass defense, I thought, could have been better. Defensive line was great, though. And Dameon Pierce was terrible. That was one thing. This doesn't really involve the Texans, but the refs were terrible and didn't make a lot of good calls on the Texans' end. There was this one play where Tank Dell got absolutely popped by former Texans punter Cameron Johnston. No longer a fan, Cameron. No flag, no roughness call there. There was a lot of missed calls by the refs, and like I said, preseason is a time for players to get better. It's not just players that get better throughout the preseason; it's the refs as well. So let me know your thoughts on preseason game 2, week 1 win against the Steelers, 20-12. Great game. Texans get the win to improve to 1-1 in the preseason. That's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace out. Go Texans.